The moment the airplane went dark, I heard a woman scream my name before I even understood what was happening. 1 second, sunlight was pouring through the oval windows, turning the clouds outside into a bright white ocean. The next, the cabin lights flickered, the engine seemed to groan, and every face around me changed from tired boredom to raw terror. Then the plane dropped so suddenly that my stomach rose into my throat, trays rattled, someone's coffee flew into the aisle, and the woman beside me threw herself into my chest like the world had already ended. Her fingers twisted into my shirt. Her tears soaked through the fabric. Her body shook so badly I could feel every breath breaking inside her. And when I looked down, I realized the woman clinging to me in the middle of that nightmare was not a stranger. It was Amara Vane. The woman I had almost married. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the strange way life sometimes brings broken hearts back together, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who still believes in love, and subscribe to Ancient Truth for more emotional stories that remind us what truly matters. That morning had begun like any other ordinary travel day, which is why I still remember it with painful clarity. The sun was bright over Phoenix when I arrived at the airport, rolling one small suitcase behind me and carrying a heaviness no luggage scale could measure. My name is Cashin Rowe, and at 37, I had become very good at looking fine. People at work thought I was calm. My neighbors thought I was polite. My friends thought I had moved on. But the truth was, I had only learned how to keep breathing around the empty space Amara left behind. 3 years earlier, she and I had stood on a seaside cliff in Monterey, dressed for a wedding that was supposed to happen the next morning. She wore a white rehearsal dress, her hair falling softly over her shoulders, her eyes shining as she held both my hands and promised that no matter what storms came, we would face them together. A photographer had captured that moment. In the picture, I was in a blue suit, smiling like a man who had never known loss. Amara was looking at me like I was her whole future. The next morning, she disappeared. No argument. No warning. No real explanation. Just a message left at the hotel desk saying she was sorry, that she could not marry me, and that I deserved a life she could not give me. I spent the first hour thinking it was a mistake. I spent the next day calling hospitals, friends, airports, police stations, anyone who might know where she had gone. Then, 2 weeks later, a mutual friend told me she had left the state with a man named Orrin Vale, a wealthy family friend who had been helping her with something none of us understood. That was the story I lived with. That was the knife I carried. So when I boarded Flight 618 that afternoon and saw Amara sitting 3 rows ahead on the right side of the plane, wearing a mustard yellow cardigan over a white top, her hair loose around her face, I nearly turned around and walked off. She looked thinner than I remembered, older in a quiet way, but still heartbreakingly familiar. Her head was turned toward the window, and for one foolish second, I thought maybe the universe was giving me a chance to ask every question that had burned inside me for years. But I said nothing. I moved past her seat, sat down 2 rows behind, and stared at my hands like they belonged to someone else. The plane took off just after noon. Outside, the sky was clear and bright, the kind of day that makes flying feel safe. The cabin settled into its usual rhythm. Seatbelts clicked. Children kicked seats. A man across the aisle fell asleep with his mouth open. Flight attendants smiled their practiced smiles and offered drinks. Everything around me was normal, but inside my chest, the past was waking up. I kept seeing that small wedding photograph in my mind. Her hand on my chest. My forehead nearly touching hers. That bright blue ocean behind us. That version of us had believed life would be gentle if we loved each other enough. Halfway through the flight, Amara turned. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us breathed. Her face went pale, and her lips parted slightly, as though she had seen a ghost. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. There was pain in her eyes, yes, but there was something else too. Fear. Not the fear of seeing an old love. A deeper fear. The kind people carry when they are hiding something that has cost them everything. She turned back around quickly. I told myself to let it go. Then the turbulence began. At first, it was mild. A small shake. A dip. The seatbelt sign came on with a soft ding. The captain's voice sounded calm as he explained that we were passing through unexpected air pockets and everyone should remain seated. A few passengers laughed nervously. Someone behind me muttered that they hated flying. I tightened my belt and looked out the window at the dazzling white clouds below. Then the plane dropped. Not a gentle dip. A sudden, violent fall. People screamed. A plastic cup spun into the air. My shoulder slammed into the seat. The overhead bins rattled like they were about to burst open. Somewhere near the back, a child cried out for his mother. The cabin lights flickered once, then steadied. My heart started pounding. The flight attendants grabbed the nearest seats and crouched in the aisle. The plane shook hard to the left, then right. A woman behind me began praying loudly. The man across the aisle woke up in panic, clawing at his seatbelt as if he had forgotten where he was. Then came the second drop. Worse than the first. The lights went out. The entire cabin plunged into shadow, even though bright daylight still glowed around the edges of the windows. The screens died. The air vents seemed to stop. For one impossible second, all I heard was silence, the kind of silence that makes the mind imagine falling, fire, ocean, impact, goodbye. Then the emergency lights came on, dim and ghostly. That was when Amara screamed. Not just from fear. She screamed my name. Before I could understand why, she was out of her seat, stumbling down the aisle while a flight attendant shouted for her to sit down. Another jolt threw her forward, and she crashed against the seat beside mine. I caught her by instinct. She collapsed into me, shaking, crying, gripping my shirt with both hands. I should have been angry. I had spent 3 years imagining what I would say if I ever saw her again. I had built speeches in my head made of pride and bitterness. But when she pressed her face against my chest and sobbed like someone who had reached the end of her strength, every speech disappeared. I held her. The plane groaned around us. Passengers cried. Someone vomited into a paper bag. The emergency lights painted everyone's faces in frightened blue shadows. Outside, sunlight flashed through clouds as the aircraft bucked and trembled. Amara kept whispering that she was sorry. At first, I thought she meant for leaving her seat. Then she lifted her face, tears streaming down her cheeks, and said she could not die with me believing she never loved me. Those words cut through the fear sharper than the turbulence. She told me everything in broken pieces while the plane shook around us. 3 years earlier, 2 weeks before our wedding, she had collapsed during a dress fitting. The doctors found a dangerous heart condition, one that required surgeries, treatment, and no guarantee of survival. She had hidden it from me at first because she didn't want to ruin the wedding. Then Oren, the man everyone thought she had chosen over me, offered to connect her with specialists through his family's medical foundation. He told her recovery would be long, expensive, uncertain, and painful. Amara believed marrying me would destroy my life. She imagined me sitting beside hospital beds instead of building a family. She imagined me giving up my dreams, my career, my happiness, all because I was too loyal to leave. So she made the cruelest decision a loving person can make. She left before I could choose her. I stared at her, stunned, while the aircraft shuddered beneath us. For 3 years, I had believed I was abandoned because I was not enough. I had believed she chose comfort, money, and another man. I had hated her because hatred was easier than missing her. But now, with her tears on my shirt and terror in her eyes, I realized the truth was far more painful. She had broken both our hearts trying to save mine. The oxygen masks suddenly dropped. The cabin erupted. People screamed again, louder this time. A flight attendant shouted instructions from the front. Parents fumbled to help their children. The elderly man beside the aisle froze until I reached across and pressed his mask into his shaking hands. Amara helped a little girl in the row ahead whose mother was panicking too badly to untangle the straps. In that chaos, something strange happened. Fear stripped everyone down to what they truly were. Strangers became human again. Hands reached across seats. Voices softened. People helped because there was nothing else to do. The captain's voice finally returned, strained but controlled. He told us the aircraft had suffered a temporary electrical failure during severe turbulence, but backup systems were functioning. We were diverting to a nearby airport for an emergency landing. He asked everyone to remain calm. Remain calm. Those words sounded almost impossible. Amara's hand found mine. She held it like she was holding on to life itself. I looked at her, and for the first time since that ruined wedding morning, I did not see the woman who left me. I saw the woman who had been alone in operating rooms, alone in recovery, alone with the belief that love meant disappearing before becoming a burden. A strange peace settled over me. Not because I was no longer afraid. I was terrified. Everyone was. But when death feels near, pride becomes useless. Old anger becomes small. What matters is who you would regret not forgiving. The descent began. The plane tilted downward through the clouds, shaking violently. Sunlight flashed across Amara's wet face. Behind us, passengers gripped armrests and whispered prayers. One woman promised her son they would get ice cream after landing. A man who had been arguing with his wife earlier now kissed her hand again and again. The whole cabin seemed suspended between ending and mercy. Amara leaned against me, exhausted. I placed one arm around her shoulders. Not as a promise. Not as forgiveness fully formed. Just as a human being holding another human being through the worst moment of their life. The runway appeared below us like a thin gray ribbon. The landing was hard. The wheels hit with a brutal force that threw everyone forward against their belts. The plane bounced once, slammed down again, and roared along the runway as the brakes screamed. People gasped, cried, and clutched one another. Then, slowly, impossibly, the aircraft stopped. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the cabin burst into applause and sobbing. The lights flickered back on. Bright, ordinary, beautiful lights. I looked down at Amara. She was still holding my shirt, but her eyes were closed, tears resting on her lashes. She whispered that we were alive. We were. Emergency vehicles surrounded the plane. We were guided off carefully, one row at a time. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm on my face, and the air smelled like fuel, grass, and rain in the distance. I had never been so grateful for solid ground. Inside the terminal, passengers hugged each other like family. The little girl Amara had helped ran back to thank her. The elderly man squeezed my shoulder and said I had a good heart. I didn't know how to answer. My heart felt broken open, but not in the same way as before. Amara and I sat near a wide window overlooking the runway. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Planes moved in the distance. People hurried past with luggage, unaware that an entire cabin of strangers had just been reminded how thin the line between life and loss can be. Finally, Amara told me she was healthy now. Not perfectly. Not magically. But stable. The surgeries had worked. The treatments had given her a future she once didn't believe she had. She said she had written me dozens of letters but never sent them. She said shame had become a prison. Every year that passed made it harder to return. I told her what her leaving had done to me. Not cruelly. Honestly. I told her about the nights I couldn't sleep. About the way I stopped trusting happiness. About how I still had that wedding photograph hidden in a drawer because throwing it away felt like killing the last honest version of myself. She cried quietly as she listened. There was no instant healing. Real life is not that simple. Love does not erase damage just because the truth finally arrives. But truth gives pain a place to rest. And that day, sitting in an airport terminal after nearly losing our lives, my pain finally stopped wandering in the dark. We did not leave together as lovers. We left as two people who had survived something. Two people who had spoken the truth. Two people who finally understood that protecting someone by lying to them is still a kind of wound. Over the next months, we talked slowly. Carefully. Some conversations were gentle. Others hurt. I learned about her hospital rooms, the fear before surgery, the loneliness she had chosen because she thought it was noble. She learned about my anger, my humiliation, my grief. We apologized often. We cried more than I expected. But little by little, the past stopped standing between us like a locked door. A year later, we returned to Monterey. Not for a wedding. Not yet. Just to stand on the same cliff where that old photograph had been taken. The ocean was bright beneath the afternoon sun. The wind moved through Amara's hair. She placed her hand against my chest, just like she had in the picture, but this time neither of us pretended life would be easy. We knew storms came. We knew fear could make people run. We knew love required more than feeling. It required honesty, courage, and the humility to let someone choose you even when life becomes hard. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ancient Truth. Your engagement helps stories like this reach people who may be holding on to pain, waiting for hope, or needing the courage to forgive. Special request: comment "Love deserves truth" if you believe real love should never be hidden behind fear. Years have passed since that flight, but I still think about the moment the power went out. I remember the screams, the darkness, the falling sensation, and Amara's arms around me. At the time, I thought the plane was breaking apart. But looking back, I realized something else was breaking too. The silence between us. The lies. The pride. The false story I had carried for 3 years. Sometimes life turns off the lights not to punish us, but to show us what we still reach for in the dark. And that day, when the whole sky seemed to fall, Amara reached for me. I reached back. And somehow, in the middle of fear, we found our way home.